Because it's the cup. The slogan doesn't really make sense, but we all understand what it means. It's the NHL's favorite way of reminding us just how much the Stanley Cup Playoffs truly matter. The passion, the sacrifice, the glory that's at stake during every shift. But let's be honest, when we look back on the Stanley Cup Playoffs, we far too often only remember one thing: the team that ends up hoisting Lord Stanley at season's end. And while that's the ultimate goal for everyone, every year there are far too many moments that get forgotten along the way. The conference finals embody exactly that. We're down to 4 teams, and the series are often mere coin flips, filled with improbable comebacks, dramatic overtimes, and playoff heartbreak. At this stage of the playoffs, it's the elite of the elite. It feels like every team is this year's team of destiny. It's the round where fans truly begin to dream. They can envision the dramatic lift from their captain, the handoff to the savvy veteran, and the names being engraved of the 20-plus now local legends. But before any of that, you have to get through the conference final. It's that one last hurdle before reaching the top of the mountain, before having a chance to achieve the pinnacle of the sport. Today we'll examine some of the best conference finals in recent memory, some of the best moments along the way, and the forgotten ones too. And of course, we can't do a conference final video without going over what is maybe the most superstitious tradition in all sports, the trophy touch. Or I guess the lack of a trophy touch. But before we dive into things, a quick disclaimer is in order. There were so many good moments to go through when making this video. Maybe we missed one of your favorites. If we did, let us know in the comments, and maybe we'll even do a part 2. There's really no other place to begin. The Cross River rivals were both at their peak in the 90s. Mike Richter versus young Martin Brodeur in the crease, Captain Mark Messier versus Captain Scott Stevens, and so much star power up and down both lineups. Both teams were top 5 in both goals scored and goals against, and had met in the first round 2 years prior in a series that went 7 games. Everyone knew this would be a good series. They split the first 2 games at MSG, with the Devils stealing game 1 in double overtime. They then split the next 2 in New Jersey, this time with the Rangers winning a game, and guess what? Double overtime. But when the Devils scored 3 third-period goals in Game 5 in New York to take a 3-2 series lead, it felt like they had a stranglehold. That's when we got one of the greatest quotes in the history of professional sports. Rangers captain Mark Messier guaranteed that the Rangers would go into New Jersey and win, forcing a Game 7. Now, we all know what happened next because of just how notable this moment is, but things did not start well on that guarantee. The Devils scored 2 first-period goals and would hold that 2-0 lead until there were just 2 minutes left in the second period. But in the third, Messier took over. His third-period natural hat-trick remains one of the greatest solo performances in NHL history, and it's even more impressive considering his pregame chatter. The Rangers would then win Game 7 at home in, once again, double overtime, capping off one of the greatest playoff series in league history. The Rangers would go on to win the Stanley Cup in another Game 7 versus the Canucks, ending a 54-year cup drought and lamenting Mark Messier as an all-time great NHL captain. Well, unless you were to ask Canuck fans. In Alexander Ovechkin's 13-year career up until this point, he scored a lot of goals. But the playoffs remained a mountain that the Washington Capitals just couldn't climb. The team had never been past the second round of the playoffs in the OV era, so in 2018, when they knocked off their kryptonite Pittsburgh Penguins, it was starting to feel like this was their chance. The Tampa Bay Lightning, though, talk about a loaded roster. Stamkos, Hedman, Palat, Alex Killorn, Ryan Callahan, Ryan McDonough, all in their prime. They had a young Kucherov, Cirelli, Vasilevsky. This team even had JT Miller. They were young, hungry, and battle-tested. You knew they were going to be a tough out, so when the Capitals took the first 2 games of this series on the road, it was pretty surprising. But the Lightning struck right back, winning the next 3 games, including 2 on the road, to take a 3-2 lead. They had 1 foot in the Stanley Cup final. But Braden Holtby had other plans. A 24-save shutout at home in Game 6 before going into Tampa and stopping all 29 shots in Game 7. He stopped the high-powered Lightning from scoring in the last 120 minutes of the series, and Washington was heading to their first Stanley Cup in 20 years. Without Braden Holtby's heroics, the narrative around Ovi's entire career would probably be very different. But most importantly, we don't get one of the greatest summers of celebration of all time. There was nothing normal about the 2021 NHL season. Its irregularity, however, gave us one of the greatest and most improbable cup runs in the lengthy history of the Montreal Canadiens, which says a lot. First of all, how did these guys get into the Western Conference Final? Well, the COVID-19 pandemic prompted the league to deal with travel restrictions with an all-new division format, which included the North Division. The way the bracket fell, the Habs were competing for a Western Conference title. And a lot of people love to discredit this Montreal Canadiens cup run, especially because a lot of these games were played in front of either an empty or limited capacity crowd, but the moments that it produced along the way can't be forgotten. From vintage Carey Price, Phil Deneau eating pizza, an emerging Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki, and of course, this legendary fan.
Yo, 2,500 will feel like 25,000, I swear to God.
It was a unique blend of old and new on this Habs roster, and while so many could see a rebuild looming, this core gave it their all. Like, they literally gave it their all. Look at Jeff Petry's eyes in this series. After coming back down from 3-1 against the Maple Leafs and then surprisingly sweeping the Jets, it started to feel like this Cinderella run in Montreal actually had some legs. This was largely in part because Carey Price had just completely turned back the clock, but whatever. Heading into the conference final, though, the Habs were still viewed as heavy underdogs versus the Vegas Golden Knights. And Game 1 showed us exactly why. Vegas handled Montreal with ease en route to a 4-1 win, but in Game 2, the Habs showed they weren't going down easy, storming off to an early 3-0 lead and would ultimately hang on to win the game 3-2. Game 3 is where things got wild as the series shifted back to Montreal in front of a limited capacity of 3,500 fans. Vegas was never once trailing in this game, and it felt like they were in control with 2 minutes left in the third until Marc-Andre Fleury, well, he kind of went full World Junior mode and did, well, this. And just like that, the Habs had life. The building came alive, and Josh Anderson found a way to score once again in overtime to give the Habs a series lead. Fleury's gaff led Vegas to turn to Robin Lehner in goal, who ended up stirring some drama up of his own when he decided to reveal his scouting report of Habs rookie Cole Caulfield to all of the media. Yeah, that didn't exactly go well for him.
He just kind of threw out some ideas for me. It's good that he's kind of opening his mouth.
Caulfield ended up scoring 4 goals in the series as a 20-year-old, and the Habs ended up taking this storyline-filled battle at home with an Arturi Lehkonen OT winner in Game 6. Clinching Montreal's first Stanley Cup appearance since 1993. And they didn't get it done in the end, but the improbability of the run mixed with the caliber of teams that they played against and a tough pandemic period, this is exactly what the city of Montreal needed. We've discussed career-defining moments, teams getting over the hump, and Cinderella stories. But this series was a lot more simple. With the last 2 years of Stanley Cup champions facing off, the right to claim dominance over this era of hockey was on the line. The Blackhawks were looking for back-to-back cups in their third in 4 years, and the Kings were looking for their second cup in 3 years. It was just simply elite hockey. The Kings took control early with a 3-1 series lead, pushing the defending cup champs to the brink, which ultimately brought the best out of them. The final 3 games of this series were all decided by 1 goal, and in Game 5, on the brink of elimination, the Blackhawks won in double overtime. They were able to force a Game 7, and that's where things got crazy. Chicago got off to a hot start in this one with leads of 2-0, 3-2, and 4-3 in the game. But this is the Kings team that won an NHL record 7 elimination games in a single playoffs en route to a Stanley Cup we were talking about. So, in typical LA fashion, they just wouldn't go away. They clawed their way to overtime, where Alec Martinez would score the winner to send them to the Cup. And while Martinez is best remembered for scoring the OT winner in the Cup final in Game 6 just a few weeks later, this one, because of the team facing elimination against the defending Stanley Cup champions, may have even been a bigger goal. It also feels like a crime that we've made it this far into a playoff video without talking about Mr. Game 7 Justin Williams. So yeah, he casually had 7 points in 7 games in this series, and of course, a Game 7 goal, and the series-winning assist. In a matchup full of proven winners and future Hall of Famers, Mr. Game 7 still reigns supreme. Yup. The Sabres used to actually make the playoffs. And they were pretty electric too. While the memories and dose of nostalgia we get when thinking about this team are great, unfortunately, they feel like one of the bigger examples of a what if in the modern NHL. Despite their shortcomings, they delivered a ton of excitement in the series, taking the eventual Stanley Cup champion Hurricanes the distance. Until damn Justin Williams scored again in a Game 7 to ice this series. how does this guy, I don't know how he keeps doing this, but anyway, this Sabres team was filled with the type of players that you sit around name dropping for hours with friends, and they produced a ton of great hockey. The final year of the Black Goathead jerseys, Danny Briere, Ryan Miller, Maxim Afinogenov, the population of Pominville. This era of the Sabres was just fun. For the Hurricanes, the team switching to 21-year-old netminder Cam Ward was their defining moment in the playoffs. And while everyone remembers how good Ward was down the stretch, he actually momentarily lost that starting job again in this series after being chased in Game 3. He didn't return to the crease until the second period of Game 5. Still, the Sabres couldn't capitalize, and after 7 games of comebacks, crazy momentum swings, OT winners, and maybe the greatest jersey matchup of the 2000s, the Hurricanes ultimately marched their way to the finals and won the thing. Unfortunately, the Sabres weren't able to get their first Stanley Cup since 1999, and with the current playoff drought they're on, many people feel that this organization is cursed. But if they really are cursed, I wouldn't blame it on 1999 captain Michael Pekka, who chose not to touch the Prince of Wales trophy. In looking back on years and years of footage, it was impossible to ignore this one thing throughout the conference finals. Every year, the moment a team either wins the Eastern Conference Finals or the Western Conference Finals, the same question comes about. Will they touch the trophy? And we all know how superstitious hockey players are. Some make no sense, some make plenty. When the two ideologies of this isn't the trophy we're playing for and we're celebrating every moment along the way face off against each other, yeah, we're going to care about that. And what makes this truly a phenomenon, in every other North American sport, these guys are going nuts for a conference final win. We're talking big time celebrations in the NFL and NBA, and of course, the champagne and goggles in the MLB. I mean, these guys love their champagne and goggles. They do it for everything. They make the playoffs. They're spraying champagne everywhere. So I guess the question I have is who started this, and does it really matter? The dialogue around this first began in 1997 when Eric Lindros of the Philadelphia Flyers forgoed touching the Prince of Wales trophy after defeating the New York Rangers. So the Flyers must have gone on to win the cup with ease, right? Nope. They got swept to the trophy-touching Detroit Red Wings. But this started the trend of a huge narrative surrounding whether a team touches or wouldn't touch a conference finals trophy. And if you look back on all the data, it's pretty interesting to say the least. There have been 27 Stanley Cup finals since 1997, meaning 54 teams were tasked with the choice of touching or not touching their conference championship trophy. 24 of those 54 decided to touch the trophy, and 30 of them decided against it. And surprisingly, the teams that touched the trophy have a significantly better record than the teams that did not. Teams that have touched the trophy have a record of 15-9, while teams that did not own a finals record of 12-18. Yikes! And some very notable players have had some interesting takes on this tradition. Let's go to Sidney Crosby. He's 0-1 in Stanley Cup finals in his career when not touching the Prince of Wales trophy after he decided to not touch it in 2008 before the Penguins lost to the Red Wings. Since, he's a very impressive 3-0 when touching the trophy, immediately winning his first the next season once again against Detroit. In many cases, it's the norm that teams that make multiple finals in a short string of seasons end up deciding to either stick with what worked or flip the outcome in hopes for a different result. Case in point, the Florida Panthers, who touched the trophy in 2023, lost to the Golden Knights in 5 games, and then didn't touch the trophy in 2024 before defeating the Oilers in 7. In 2013, Captain Serious Jonathan Toews started a bit of a trend where captains would bring their entire team around the trophy, pose for a photo, but nobody touches it. Now, when you see something like this, you have to wonder, how long did these guys plan this out in the dressing room? Because it just seems like this is very serious stuff. So serious that teams started to follow suit. The Blackhawks did it once again in 2015, and the Sharks and Predators followed up in 2016 and 2017. But I think the most interesting will he touch the trophy saga ever has to be Alex Ovechkin. For someone who spent so much of his career under so much criticism for never winning a cup, to not only go up there and touch the Prince of Wales trophy, but to lift it and then bring it on the team plane, and then to go on to win the cup in 5 games? Yeah, it's pretty baller, Ovi. Overall, this is a fun thing to follow and keep track of, and the superstition is certainly not going anywhere. But let's be honest, A lot goes into winning the Stanley Cup. Touching or not touching the conference finals trophy isn't one of those things. I said it earlier that it'd be impossible for me to cover every single series in this video. And while you're probably yelling at your screen that I didn't break down Gretzky's missed high stick or Lafleur's game-tying goal thanks to a Boston Bruins too many men penalty, some honorable mentions for some of the best moments along the way are definitely in order. Let's start with J.S. Giguère in 2003. His name came up a lot a year ago when McDavid won the Conn Smythe on a losing team, which hadn't happened since Giguère accomplished the feat in 03. It's not something we see often, but it was fully deserved. He had some very high-level play throughout a 7-game Stanley Cup final, but his Western Conference final specifically is some of the highest level goaltending dominance the NHL has ever seen. The Ducks swept the Wild in 4 games, with Giguère allowing just 1 goal in the whole series. He finished with 3 shutouts and a .992 save percent. What? And if you want to stick with the goalie theme, how about a shout out for Tim Thomas and Dwayne Rolison in the 2011 Eastern Conference Finals? 2 crazy Game 7 goaltending performances in a 1-0 Bruins win, in a game where both goalies probably deserved to head to the final. If you want a heartfelt story, there's Marty St. Louis scoring a Game 4 OT winner to put the Rangers up 3-1 on the Canadiens just 2 weeks after his mom passed away. If you want a great comeback, there's the Devils coming from 3-1 behind against the Flyers in 2000. They'd go on to win the Cup. If you want a history lesson, the longest game in NHL history was technically a conference final. The 1936 NHL semifinal between the Red Wings and Maroons went a whopping 6 overtimes. And the league worked a little differently back then. There weren't really conferences, but that's still the round before the Cup. And if you want a rivalry, there was plenty of nastiness between the Red Wings and the Avalanche in the late 90s. And nastiness doesn't even begin to describe these ones. Point is, sometimes it's the battle before the finale that gives us the best moments. And in the case of the conference finals, too many instrumental moments of greatness and intrigue are cast into the shadow of the Stanley Cup. And don't get me wrong, the Cup is why the players play the games and why as fans watch them. But if we aren't paying tribute to the journey along the way, then what's the point?